Well, good morning, everyone, to our Development Standards meeting this morning. First of all, I would like to welcome Jill Patterson, our new service leader, this will be her first meeting with us. So, Jill, I did see you someplace, but very well welcome to Development Standards.
Very much. Thank you very much.
I'd also like to take this opportunity before we start to pay tribute to Murray Agnew, who is leaving us, or probably left us by now. Murray, who's leaving the council, during his 16 years, Murray was been involved in dealing with some of the largest and most significant planning developments in our area and made a very significant positive contribution to Angus, to our people and our environment. Should it take place, I would like to record my thanks to Murray for his service to the council and wish him all the very best in his future career. I'm sure we all do the same. Great notice. So move on now to our meeting. Do apologies of absence.
Yes, Convener, we have apologies from Councillors Durno and King.
Declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest?
Councillor Brace, Convener.
Councillor Brace.
Yes, Convener, thank you. The applicant in agenda items number 7 and 8 is known to me, but we have no business dealings, and you know, it couldn't be described as a strong friendship. So I just thought that I should have this noted, and I will remain in the meeting and take part in any decision making.
Okay, I would also like to declare an interest in 7 and 8. I'm known to the applicant, but as I'm known to most of the farmers in the area, it's no different. So I'll be remaining in my seat and convening the meeting. Any other declarations of interest? Councillor Brace, you can take your hand down now. Minutes of the previous meeting, those not agreed?
Agreed.
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 I've sort of jumped a bit. Item number 3, building warrants we should be on. The committee is asked to note that during the period the 1st of August to the 8th of October 2020, a total of 108 building warrants, 2 demolition of warrants and 30 amendments of warrants has been approved with an estimated cost of £5,458,360. Is that noted? Is that noted? Agreed. Delegated decisions. The committee is asked to note during the period the 1st of August to the 8th of October 2021, a total of 131 planning applications have been approved, with 3 refused under the scheme of delegation to officers. Agenda item 5 is the minutes of the previous meeting, which were noted already. So we'll move on to agenda item 6, which is planning application at 152 High Street, Arbroath, for a change of use from retail to fast food takeaway. Could we have the slides, please?
Thank you, Convener. I hope you're seeing my screen in front of you all.
Yep.
So item 6 is a planning application. As you've indicated, it relates to a proposal for a change of use from a retail unit to a hot food takeaway and seating area at 152 High Street, Arbroath. Here we have a couple of plans. On the left-hand side, we have a plan submitted by the applicant. It shows the in the red line, and you can see that the site lies to the west of the High Street, just in the proximity of Kirk Square in Arbroath. So it's quite a central location in the town. On the right extract from the Angus Local Development Plan. And again, application site located just round about the area on the screen. So this plan is showing a red line. Red line identifies the wider town centre area within Arbroath. The pink or salmon tone identifies the Arbroath to Harbour conservation area. And the purple lines that you see in this area identify what's defined as the core retail area within the town. So our policies in this area are trying to retain a predominance of retail shop frontages at ground floor level. However, our policies also advocate a town centre first approach, so seeking to direct retail uses and commercial leisure uses to our defined town centre area. Within the core retail area, our policies allow for change of use of existing retail units where the vacancy rate is above 10% or where the proposed use is a cafe or restaurant. Now, in this case, the vacancy rate within the core retail area at the present time is around about 15%. So it's above the 10% threshold, and in that respect, the principle of change of use of an existing ground floor property to a non-retail use is compatible with the council's policies. Just moving on, you can see the application property identified in the centre of the screen here. So the property just identified with the cursor. Application relates to the ground floor and the upper floor, as we'll see from the plans as we move on. Retail use at ground floor to either side of the property, and you can see the pedestrian precinct area of the high street just in the foreground. Plans that show the proposed internal layout of the property. At the top, you can see the upper floor would provide a staff area and office accommodation, whilst at the ground floor we have the entrance, we have the serving area, the preparation area, storage area, and the seating area that I referenced, maybe around about 21 covers within the entire property. So there is a seating area, but the predominant use of the building would be as a hot food takeaway. Also have some facilities for patrons just towards the rear of the property, and storage and recycling area just located to the rear of the building. In terms of external alterations, the proposal provides for a fairly substantial flue located to the rear of the building. So we have the high street frontage located just at the right hand side of the screen, the building itself, and to the rear you can see there would be a high level flue to discharge odours associated with the cooking process. Now you can perhaps also make out just in this drawing, there is a chimney adjacent to the property, and the proposal is to install the flue such that it sits adjacent to the chimney on the neighbouring property. And again, you can get an impression of that just at the left-hand side of the screen, where the flue would terminate round about the same height as the chimney on the neighbouring property. So again, looking at the High Street area, application site located on the west side of the High Street in this area. See, there are residential properties in the immediate vicinity of the proposal. Our advice note, the council's advice note, which provides guidance on hot food takeaways, identifies that town centres are an acceptable location for hot food takeaways. But the key issues relate to amenity impacts, so issues related to predominantly noise and smell. Now, noise assessment and odour assessments have been submitted in relation to this application. Those have been reviewed by our colleagues in environmental health, and they're satisfied that in this case, impacts can be suitably mitigated. That's not to say they would be eliminated, but they can be mitigated such that they would meet acceptable levels. And you'll see that we've proposed conditions to deal with those matters. Another issue that's been raised are concerns regarding antisocial behaviour. And again, just on this slide, draw your attention to the CCTV camera located just outside the property. And this provides some surveillance of the town centre area. Again, doesn't guarantee that antisocial behaviour won't take place, but it does provide surveillance of the area, and that's a benefit of a town centre location that wouldn't be achieved through potential other locations. Just looking at the rear of the property, you can see mixed townscape quality, but this is the area where the flue would be located, sitting against the chimney stack of the neighbouring property. And if I can just move on to the next slide, this is a photograph taken from the Abbeygate car park. Again, flue would be located in the general area that we see here. So concerns have been raised by third parties about impact on the conservation area, but I hope you can see from this slide that on the rear elevation of the property, sitting adjacent to the chimney stack and in the context of the surrounding townscape, the visual impacts associated with the proposals are going to be fairly minimal. The proposal complies with the Council's locational policies for hot food takeaways. It's making use of a vacant unit within a town centre area in a manner which colleagues are satisfied can address amenity impacts. On that basis, the proposal complies with development plan policy and it's recommended for approval. Thank you, Convener.
Right, thank you, Alan.
To the right-hand side of that image, there is a public seating area, and again, I believe there are litter bins in the vicinity of that seating area. Similarly, there are no photographs looking in a southerly direction down the high street, but again, litter bins just a short distance to the south of the property.
Okay, thank you. And in paragraphs 810 and 811, 810 says our Advice Note 2018 indicates that within town centre locations, hot food takeaways will not normally be considered acceptable where they occupy premises directly abutting. Then in paragraph 811, you state that the first floor property to the south appears to be in residential use and is out with the control of the applicant. So if that is abutting the site, can you explain why it's not falling foul of Advice Note 2018, please?
Of course, Councillor Moore. If I can refer you back to paragraph 8.10, the final part of that paragraph indicates that it has demonstrated that impacts from noise and odour are not significant. So the policy doesn't allow premises that immediately abut residential property unless it is demonstrated that impacts from noise and odour are not significant. So in this instance, we've had noise assessment undertaken, we've had odour assessment undertaken. And as indicated, our colleagues in the Environmental Health Service are satisfied that in this case, the impacts would not be significant, and on that basis, the proposal is compatible with the advice note guidance.
Thank you. Now, also in paragraph 821, it's referring to the ALDP as recently become more than 5 years old, and therefore it alters the situation. But isn't the target determination date such that it was before the ALDP became 5 years old? And therefore, would that not affect the reasoning in paragraph 821?
I think what's relevant for members is the date at which the situation at which the application is determined. So you are required to have regard to the circumstances as they exist at the present time. And it is a matter of fact that at this present time, the local development plan is more than 5 years old. And that's a factor to take into consideration. I would suggest that in this instance, it doesn't materially change the weight that would be attached to the council's policies, and I don't believe that the determination or the status of the local development plan changes how you should consider the application. The general thrust of Scottish planning policy remains a town centre first approach. That's consistent with TAFE plan, which is still within a 5-year period, and this is a proposal for a commercial leisure development within a town centre area. So the general thrust of government policy and of the council's policies remains relevant to the determination of the application.
Thank you. Last but not least, the frontage is in the conservation area, I believe, and therefore what control have we got over how it looks? I mean, I'm just thinking back to...
So there are no proposals to paint the frontage as part of this application, and if there were separate proposals to do something to the property, those would be considered in relation to available permitted development rights, which exist for certain properties. And if an application was required, that application would be considered in the context of council policy. The applicant will have deemed consent rights to erect non-illuminated advertisement signs. That can happen under deemed consent provisions. That's not something that we can control, and it's certainly not something that we can control through an application for planning permission.
So if he wanted to go and paint the whole of the front of that building bright purple, we can't stop him?
He will have certain permitted development rights available to him. The extent of those permitted development rights are something that we would look at in the context of any specific proposal.
Thank you.
Any other questions to Alan? No other questions. We'll move on to comments. Any comments? Councillor Moore, your hand's still up. Are you making a comment?
Sorry, no, convenient. It's a legacy hand.
Comments, please.
No comments, convener.
Okay, well, there's no comments. I'm quite happy to move this application. It's an empty building. It's probably not ideal, but I'm moving the application as it stands. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
So therefore, application number 21/00554 is hereby approved with conditions attached. Move on to items number 7 and 8, which is for a planning application for a respectively and for a biomass boiler at North Means of Corn South, and 8 is for a new application for a biomass boiler. Alan will be presenting this, both 7 and 8 together, and then we'll decide, decisions done one by one. Alan, could we have the slides, please?
Thank you. In the lobby, I wonder if one of those is the applicant for this application, and whether we need to admit them, Sarah.
Yeah, Mr. Dowell is actually in. Sorry, we're having difficulty, so we've tried about 3 times. So if you just ignore those 2 waiting in the lobby, but I see Mr. Dowell listed separately, so hopefully he can hear what's being said.
Thank you, Sarah. Well, thank you again, convener. As you've indicated, this is a single presentation that's dealing with items 7 and 8. 2 separate applications at North Mains of Conan Scythe by Arbroath. The first is a retrospective application for a biomass production facility, which includes 3 biomass boilers, a district heating system predominantly serving agricultural sheds, and timber storage, chipping and drying. The second application is an application for an additional 900 kilowatt boiler and an associated 12.7 metre high flue. We now have a slide which shows the general location of the application site. Application site identified just by the red circle in the middle of the screen, and you can perhaps make out some blue dots on this image, on this map, and that identifies the properties in the surrounding area. So you can see we have the closest properties located at Fairfield Mains, just to the northwest, and I believe it's Black Hillock located just to the north, and also some properties in the vicinity of Helenston, just located to the east. North Mains of Conan Scythe farmhouse itself, directly associated with the proposal, and I believe the property to the south at Mid Mains of Conan Scythe with the applicants. Number of objections to both applications, and the general location of those are identified by the larger blue circles on the screen. So we have objections from properties at Summerhill, Mid Park of Gardyne, just located to the west, to the northwest, and a number from East Cotton of Gardyne, or that vicinity, just located to the north. The closest of those probably round about the Gardyne area, maybe in the region of 800 metres from the application site itself. Just in a little bit more detail, we have the application site located in the top left-hand corner of the image. The B961 public road running from Redford to Leggeston Bray. Can perhaps make out that it's reasonably straight at this point. Good visibility in either direction. It's a fairly sizable farm unit, so at the moment there's a large throughput of crops going in and out of the junction on a regular basis, and our roads colleagues have confirmed there's no history of accidents in the immediate vicinity of the junction itself. Just the image on the right hand side shows the site in a little bit more detail. Just draw your attention to the red line that runs down the middle of that image, and that's showing the district heating system. So this is underground pipework that serves a number of the agricultural buildings to provide heat to the buildings, and also heat to the farmhouse located at the southern extent of the site. Just in terms of the first application before you, which relates to the biomass production facility, that involves the storage of timber at the northern extent of the site, just at the top of the screen identified by the cursor. 2 areas where timber is stored on a temporary basis. It's then chipped on an area of hard standing that you see just to the north of one of the potato sheds. The chip material, stored within buildings to feed boilers located within the sheds. 2 drying bays, which we'll see in photographs as we move through. One of those drying bays used to dry wood chip, the other used to dry crops associated with the agricultural use of the property. And we also have a biomass boiler, the third retrospective biomass boiler, located in the shed just at the left-hand side of the screen that we see here. And again, you see the district heating network that's providing heat to the agricultural buildings themselves. Just an elevation, the red flues that you can see identified on the building are the existing flues associated with the boilers that are in situ. You'll see each discharges at a height above the highest part of the ridge of the agricultural buildings. We have 2 boilers located within the agricultural shed that we see in this area, and the third existing boiler identified in red just in the area that we see identified by the cursor. And feeders that provide wood chip to the boilers, just the red circles that you can also see on this image. Another drawing this time, you'll note we now have a 4th flue, or a flue identified in red. The existing flue is identified in grey, so this is the additional flue that would be provided to serve the 4th boiler that's proposed by the 2nd application. So again, it's located within an existing building, new flue erected to serve that boiler, again venting just above the ridge of the agricultural buildings. This time an aerial view. Again, you can see the public road located at the bottom of the screen. Draw your attention to the trees that line the road itself. So some immediate vicinity from the public road of the farm buildings themselves. The new flue located just in the area identified by the cursor at the left-hand side of the farm complex. Timber storage again identified by the cursor, and on this image you can make out the properties at Black Hillock located in the area here. Again, you can perhaps see we have a number of trees located between the application site and the property itself, and we have Fairfield Mains located to the northwest. Again, properties at this point, maybe around about 300 metres from the closest house to the closest part of the operation itself. So reasonable separation distance in this instance. This is a photograph taken from the public road, maybe at a distance of around about 600 metres. So looking back towards the existing agricultural complex, can perhaps make out flues associated with the existing operation located in this area, but very much seen against the context of the working agricultural farm. And I would suggest at this point the visual impact associated with the existing flues is fairly limited. I should point out that the flue, the higher of the flues at the present time, does have a section removed, so it would be a little higher than shown in this photograph. But again, at the distances involved, in the context of the buildings that are present on site, again, I would suggest that the impacts are fairly insignificant in terms of visual impact. Looking at the site in a little bit more detail, you can see timber storage. So we have timber delivered to the site on a fairly regular basis throughout the year, maybe 300 to 400 tons of timber delivered at a time, and that's stored just in the general area that you can see on the slide before you. Chipping of that timber then takes place on the hard standing that you can see in the foreground of the image. And you can see with relation to this application, which seek to limit the number of times that chipping can take place throughout the course of the year, to limit the hours of operation, the duration of that chipping, and there are also conditions that seek to limit noise associated with the development itself. The timber storage is seen in the context of normal agricultural storage that takes place around about the farm court. So looking at the biomass building itself, you can perhaps make out one of the flues. So boilers located within the building that we can see here. You can perhaps make out some wood chip stored within these sections of the building, and this is used to feed the existing boilers. 2 drying bays located just to the left-hand side of and these drying bays used to dry wood chip and also crops produced through agricultural working practices. And then we have some storage area located just beyond that, so used to store wood chip and dried agricultural produce, and then more tatty boxes just at the far end of the building that we see here. Looking in the opposite direction from that photograph, we have the Black Hillock property. You can't see the property, it's screened by the trees that you can see in the middle ground. The property is at Fairfield Mains, as I've indicated, maybe around about 300 metres from the closest part of the operation that we're looking at. The tree just in the foreground that we can see here, maybe around about 150 metres from the application site, so maybe halfway between the Fairfield Mains properties and the application site. And this is an image from that point looking back towards the farm complex. So around about the boilers located within the area that we see here, just at the right-hand side of the screen. 2 boilers located in this area and 2 boilers located within this area. You can see the wood storage, and again you can see that within the context of the agricultural storage that takes place around about the farm buildings. Again, at the distances involved, the impacts associated with the proposal are not considered significant. So again, just looking at the wider area, we have the application property, the closest properties, none of which have objected to the application, and we have the neighbouring properties where we do have objection. The properties to the north, the closest at around about 800 metres, those to the west, maybe close to 1 kilometre from the application site itself. Looking at the aerial photograph, the properties to the north, you can perhaps make out there are landscape features, trees, hedgerows, some very minor undulation in the landscape form that reduce the prominence of the development within the area. This is a working agricultural landscape. Some noise, some activity associated with agricultural operations are not to be unexpected. And again, our environmental health colleagues have considered the proposal. They've looked at air quality information, satisfied that emissions from the operation of the boiler affect air quality to any significant extent, and similarly satisfied that, subject to the limitations on the chipping operations, there should be no significant adverse impact on the amenity of those that live in the area by virtue of noise. Again, that's not to say noise won't be heard, that there may not be obvious emissions from this, but those should all be within acceptable limits. So objectors' properties located just in the area that we see to the left of the screen, round about here, and also to the north. But as indicated, the closest properties, Helenston to the east, Black Hillock to the north, Fairfield Mains to the northwest, no objections from those properties. Also on this slide, just draw your attention to Cononside Crossroads, a point which members will be familiar with. Next photograph taken just from the proximity of the crossroads at a distance of around about 1 kilometre. So this is looking back towards the farm complex, and you can see at this distance any development associated with the proposal, the additional flue, the visual impact is going to be very minimal. Our policies support employment-related development in the rural area, they support agricultural related development in the rural area, and they support renewable energy development where impacts can be appropriately mitigated, where impacts are not significant. And as indicated in the report, in this instance, officers are satisfied that the proposal will not give rise to significant impacts, either of the proposals, and that both applications are compatible with development plan policy. Thank you, Convener.
Right, thank you, Alan. We'll go back to item 7. Do we have any questions to Alan on agenda item 7, the retrospective planning application for the biomass boiler? Councillor Breeze.
Yes, thanks, Convener. I note that this is a retrospective planning application for a biomass boiler, and we seem to have had quite a lot of retrospective planning applications for biomass boilers on farms. And I wonder what's the reason for that? And if you have an opinion on what the reason might be, why so many farmers have decided to put in their biomass boilers before applying for planning permission. Was it, for example, because they didn't appreciate they needed planning permission?
Yeah, I think that's a difficult question for me to answer, Councillor Brace. There are certain permitted development rights that allow for the installation of biomass boilers in agricultural settings, and I think interpretation of those permitted development rights can be complex, and that may lead to a degree of uncertainty. In some instances, the works associated with the installation are fairly minimal. For example, if it's installation of a boiler within an existing building, I can understand that people might think there are limited planning issues associated with that. You're a farmer yourself. You'll no doubt have your own and slightly better opinions as to why it may occur. Equally, we do have the applicant in attendance, and I guess it would be a fair question to pose to the applicant.
Councillor Moore.
Yes, thank you, Convener. I know, Mr. Hunter, you said that there was crop traffic movement, but I think you'd agree that's seasonal, and that our colleagues in roads have said there is no history of accidents. But what is the impact likely to be of heavy traffic on a regular basis? You're talking about 300 to 400 tonnes of wood per delivery, which possibly 75 to 100 vehicles or more. Has that been calculated and looked at the impact on the main road, well, the B road, and on the local highway reaching it?
So thank you, Councillor Moore. Yes, I think our roads colleagues have looked at both proposals in the round. The 300 to 400 tonnes, I understand, is delivered generally on 25-tonne lorries. So each delivery is around about 16 vehicles coming to the site. That's a relatively small amount of vehicle movement compared with the several thousand tonnes of potatoes and cereal crops that are leaving the site. And yes, that's seasonal, but it's, you know, it's seasonal throughout the year. Different harvests will take place at different times. So there's, I believe, fairly regular movements associated with the operation itself. And yes, our roads colleagues have had full regard to the movements associated with that, and they are satisfied that in a rural area such as Angus, the additional traffic movement associated with the proposal would not be uncommon or out of place, or indeed place any unreasonable burden on the roads infrastructure.
Thank you.
Any other questions to Alan? No other questions. Sarah, can you tell me if Mr. Gaffney is available now?
Convener, we have Mr. Dowell in the meeting.
Just Mr. Dowell.
I
Yes.
think he's just available for questions.
Yes, okay. Any questions to Mr. Dowell?
I think
Please. Okay, followed by Councillor Duff. You're on mute.
Sorry, convener. Yes, I do have a question for Mr. Dowell, and it's a question asked of Mr. Hunter. He's given a wee bit of an explanation as to why perhaps this is a retrospective planning application. I would have just liked to ask Mr. Dowell the same question, please.
Yeah, Mr. Dowell speaking. I've got Mr. Gaffney sitting to my right-hand side as well, so Scott's listening in. You were asking a question about why we didn't apply for planning permission. Well, like you say, we're probably putting them in existing buildings originally, and probably didn't see a need for a planning permission for that. But also to do with the accreditation of the biomass burners for the RHI scheme, there was no need for the planning permission or permitted development rights to put them in to get accreditation. So there was no incentive for us to do it, apart from just thinking it would be a good idea. So now the RHI scheme have changed the rules to any new applications must have a certificate of permitted development or a planning approval. That's the reason for this last one having a planning permission. But also in some of the audits that have been happening with RHI installations, they have now probably a little bit underhandedly changed the goalposts now to say that we have to have planning permission on site for the biomass installation for it to continue with its RHI accreditation. So that's the reason you've got many applications been coming through the system now. That answers that question, I think.
Well, thank you. That does answer it. I think Mr. Hunter was correct too in that, you know, I can well imagine why you might not have thought you needed any planning permission because of the permitted development rights that you do have. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Duff, did you have a question? No.
Well,
on mute.
yeah, I did actually convene, but my question really was to Mr. Hunter, and it was kind of an addendum to Councillor Bray's original question. But I'll leave it now because I think that we've probably discussed the issues sufficiently. So no questions from me. Thanks.
Right, thank you. Councillor Bray, your hand's still up. Are there any questions to Mr. Dowell? No, if there's no other questions, move to comments. Do we have any comments on this application? No comments. Well, I'm quite happy to move this.
Councillor Nicholl.
Convener, we've got Councillor Bray's. I'm showing a hand up there for you, Councillor Bray's and Councillor Nicholl.
I don't see Councillor Bray's hand up, and I don't see.
I I see that it's not shown on the screen, but it's shown on the participants list. So apologies for that, convener.
We have Councillor Nicholl.
Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you, convener. This respective application, I've seen similar biomass boilers used for agricultural use on various farms, and this appears to be a very tidy professional operation, and I would have no problem in passing this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholl. Councillor Brace.
Yes, well, I will now make a comment, convener. Yes, I did notice, I read carefully all the objections to this, that most of the objections seem to be centred around emissions, but we've had advice from Environmental Health who have no problem with this application, nor do the roads. It would seem to me that the visual impact is negligible. And so I'm very happy with this application. And I would also add that some of the objections centred around the sort of industrialisation of North Mains-o-Conn-side. Well, farming is an industry, agriculture is an industry, and it does involve modernisation, and it does involve the adoption of the latest techniques, and so the countryside's always a changing environment. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Councillor Duff, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I must admit, my comments were going to be similar to what Councillor Brace has said. I mean, I have a biomass boiler in my garage, which is about 7 metres from where I'm actually speaking, and yes, you get a little bit of a smell in the morning when it starts up, but I don't think it's an issue. I did do a drive by the farm yesterday, and it is, I would say, fairly isolated. It is a large unit, but as Councillor Brace has said, that's the way that agriculture is going, and I think biomass is a renewable energy source. That's why they get the RHI payment. And I think we need to commend the farmer for developing in this way. We're all getting very excited about COP26 and you know, the green agenda. So using sustainable wood to heat is better than using diesel or oil or something like that. So I think it's to be supported.
Thank you. Any other comments? No other comments. I'm quite happy to move this report. I think this is a far-reaching and forward-looking application, and I'd really like to congratulate the applicant on this far-looking application. So I'm moving for this for approval. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Application number 21/00550 is hereby approved. Move on to agenda item 8. Members, any questions to the officer?
Convener, Councillor Duff has his hand up. I'm not sure if that's from previous comments.
Right, sorry, that's a legacy hand. I shall remove it.
So we're looking for questions to Alan on agenda item 8.
No questions, convener.
No, it's much the same as the last one. Do we have speakers again, which will be questions to Mr. Dowell, or if Mr. Gaffney's there?
Again, no questions, convener.
No, I think this is similar to the previous application. So once again, this is, as I said, this is outward looking and far reaching, and the applicant has to be congratulated on this application. And I'm really quite happy to move this planning application for approval. Is that agreed?
Convener, Councillor Moore has his hand up.
Councillor Moore?
No, it's determined now.
Therefore, application number 21-00024 full is hereby approved. Thank you. And that concludes our meeting for today.
Thanks,
Thank you all.
Convener.
Thank you all for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you.